You buy a box. It sits in your trunk for 3 days. Eventually, you clear some space in the living room, drag the box inside, and open it. You find dozens of wooden panels, hundreds of screws, a small hex key, and an instruction manual that contains no words. You start to build. You assemble the frame. You attach the shelves. You realize halfway through that you have put a panel in backward. You take it apart. You put it back together. Your hands ache. You are frustrated. You are sweating. You are annoyed. Finally, you tighten the last screw. The furniture stands there in your room. It is not perfect. It is slightly wobbly. It looks exactly like the product that was in the catalog. Only this one was built by you. You find yourself standing back, looking at it, and feeling a distinct sense of pride. When a friend comes over and mentions the chair, you find yourself pointing it out. You might even mention that you built it yourself. You value that piece of furniture more than the expensive pre-built armchair you bought last year. You are more attached to it. You are less likely to get rid of it. You perceive it as having higher quality. This is the Ikea effect. It is a cognitive bias that changes how we value our own efforts. We value things because we are the ones who created them, more than because they are good or useful. This bias is so powerful that it overrides objective reality. You can look at a table built by a professional carpenter and a table built by a clumsy amateur. And if you are the amateur, you will often judge your own work as superior. You prioritize the effort you spent over the quality of the result. This phenomenon affects your purchasing habits, your relationships, your professional life, and the way you see your own accomplishments. It is a fundamental part of the modern consumer experience, yet almost no one realizes it is happening while they are in the middle of it. To understand why your brain does this, we have to look at the work of Dan Ariely, Michael Norton, and Daniel McCon. They are behavioral economists who decided to test the boundaries of this bias. They recruited a group of participants and asked some of them to fold origami and others to build simple structures out of Lego bricks. Among the origami builders, some worked from clear folding instructions, while others were given none at all, forcing them to figure it out on their own. They also had a third group, where the researchers built the structures for them. When the task was finished, they asked the participants how much they would be willing to pay for the structures. The participants who built the structures themselves valued them significantly higher than those who were given a finished product. The amount of effort they put in directly correlated with the price they placed on the final result. The participants who struggled the most, those who had to figure out the construction without instructions, valued their creations the most of all. The labor itself changed their perception of the value. They were paying for the time, the frustration, the struggle, and the ultimate success of putting it together. They had invested themselves into the object. Once they became the authors of that object, they became protective of it. This bias extends into the world of retail in ways that are deeply calculated. Think about the products that are most popular in the modern world. They are rarely just ready to use. They are products that invite you to participate. You see this in the surge of meal kit delivery services. You pay for the ingredients, you pay for the delivery, and then you do the cooking yourself. If a restaurant served you the exact same food, you would judge it based on the taste and the presentation. But when you make the meal yourself, you value it differently. You have contributed. You have chopped the onions. You have seasoned the meat. You have timed the cooking. The meal becomes an extension of your own work. The IKEA effect ensures that you enjoy the food more, simply because you are the one who prepared it. This logic applies to digital services as well. Think about software or apps that allow for high levels of customization. When you spend hours setting up a profile, choosing a theme, organizing your preferences, and populating your dashboard, you are building a version of the software that is uniquely yours. You are performing labor. The software developers know that the more time you spend customizing your environment, the more you will value the service, and the less likely you will be to switch to a competitor. They are selling you the opportunity to invest your own labor into their platform. Your effort is the glue that keeps you attached to their brand. The psychological root of this behavior lies in our need for competence. Humans have an evolutionary drive to master their environment. We are makers as much as we are consumers. When we engage in a task that requires skill, attention, and effort, we are satisfying a deep internal requirement to prove to ourselves that we have agency over the physical world. This need for accomplishment is so potent that we will often inflate the value of our own work just to confirm that the effort was worth it. We are wired to avoid the conclusion that our labor was pointless. If we spent 3 hours building a chair, our brain demands that the chair be valuable. It refuses to accept that 3 hours of our lives were wasted on something that is only worth $10. So, the brain bridges the gap by increasing the subjective value of the chair. This bias functions as a protective mechanism for our self-esteem. If we had to accurately assess the value of everything we created, we would often be forced to admit that we are mediocre at many things. We would have to admit that our cooking is average, our DIY furniture projects are flimsy, and our creative hobbies hobbies produce work that is not actually impressive. That realization would be painful. It would discourage us from trying again. To prevent this, the brain tilts the scales. It allows us to view our own creations through a lens of extreme positivity. This makes us feel capable. It makes us feel effective. It keeps us motivated to continue interacting with the world. There is a critical condition for the IKEA effect to take hold. The labor must be completed. If you start a project, struggle with it, and then fail to finish it, the effect disappears. In fact, it reverses. When we fail to complete a task, we feel a sense of frustration and inadequacy. The bias requires the completion of the project to validate the effort. If you quit halfway through building the IKEA bookshelf, you will resent the bookshelf. You will see the pile of wood and the screws as a symbol of your inability to finish the job. The satisfaction that fuels the IKEA effect is entirely dependent on the successful conclusion of the task. This creates a fascinating dynamic in how we view the things we own. We own the stories of how we acquired our objects and the memory of the struggle to assemble them. When you look around your home, you see a collection of things, but beneath the surface, you are surrounded by a collection of investments. You have invested hours of your life into these objects, and your brain tracks that investment. It adds a premium to the value of each item based on the effort you expended. This is why it is so difficult to sell your belongings at a garage sale. You see the chair and you remember the 2 hours you spent struggling with the assembly. You see the desk and you remember the pride of getting it upright. The buyer only sees the scratch on the finish and the slightly wobbly leg. They see a used piece of furniture, while you see a project that you successfully conquered. This disconnect is the reason why people often overprice their own possessions. They are trying to sell the labor they invested, while the buyer's only trying to buy the utility of the object. This leads us to a moment where the lines of our perception become truly blurred. If the value of our work is essentially manufactured by our own minds to protect our sense of competence, what does that say about the validity of our accomplishments? We spend our lives working, creating, and building, believing that we are producing value. But if a large portion of the satisfaction we derive from that work is just a chemical feedback loop designed to make us feel useful, does that diminish the reality of what we have achieved? Is it possible that we are trapped in a cycle of valuing low-quality work simply because it is ours? We tell ourselves that we are creating something meaningful, but maybe we are just managing our own psychology to stay satisfied with the status quo. Consider the artist who paints a canvas. They spend weeks on the brush strokes, the blending, the composition. They feel a deep connection to the piece. They see a masterpiece. An audience might look at the same canvas and see a mediocre effort. The artist is not lying to themselves, but they are also not seeing the objective truth. They are under the influence of the effort they poured into the painting. This happens in every field. Writers, coders, parents, athletes. We become so close to our own process that we lose the ability to see the product for what it is. We are blinded by the work we put into it. The result is that we often cling to our old ideas, our old projects, and our old methods long after they have stopped being useful. We protect them because we spent so much time on them. We are haunted by the effort we invested. We continue to pour time into sinking ships because the alternative is to admit that we were wrong. This is the hidden cost of the IKEA effect. It keeps us stagnant. It makes us resistant to feedback. It makes us stubborn in the face of better alternatives. Because to accept a better way, we would have to abandon the way we built, which would feel like a betrayal of the effort we already spent. This bias makes us love our mistakes. It makes us cherish the processes that are inefficient and the results that are suboptimal. It convinces us that because we built it, it must be the right way. This logic permeates our social structures as well. Think about how we raise children. We put an enormous amount of effort into parenting. We invest years of our lives into teaching, guiding, and supporting. This effort creates a bond that is undeniably profound. This helps explain why we struggle to see our children objectively, even though the love is real. We are the ones who put in the work, so we are the ones who place the highest value on the result. We see our own labor in them. We see our own fingerprints on their development. We see this same pattern in how we view our careers. People often stay in jobs they do not enjoy for years. They tell themselves that they are building something, that they are contributing, that they are creating value. They cling to the role, the title, and the company. They feel a sense of ownership over the projects they have led. When an outsider looks at the situation, they see a stagnant career and a company that is going nowhere. The employee sees a life work. The IKEA effect prevents them from leaving. They have put in the work. They have built the internal structure of their professional life. To walk away would be to admit that the effort was not worth the investment. It is easier to believe that the job has value because you are the one who has been doing it for so long. Even the way we engage with global issues can be influenced by this. When we spend time researching a topic, creating arguments, and building a worldview, we become deeply attached to that perspective. It becomes our information, something we built ourselves. We have built it. We have assembled the facts and the opinions into a coherent structure that supports our identity. When someone presents evidence that contradicts our view, we experience it as an attack on our construction. We fight to defend the structure we built, regardless of whether it is sound. We are defending our labor, our time, and the effort we spent to construct the argument. The irony is that the more difficult the construction, the stronger the attachment. This is why people who go through arduous initiation rituals in groups or organizations often become the most loyal members. The process is painful. It requires effort. It requires sacrifice. If you survive the process, your brain tells you that the group must be worth it. It has to be worth it. Otherwise, you would have to admit that you put yourself through unnecessary suffering for nothing. So, you increase your loyalty. You justify the group's flaws. You become an advocate for the organization. The effort you invested is what binds you to them. Companies have figured this out. They know that if they can get you to participate in the process, they can lock in your loyalty. They give you a kit. They give you a platform. They give you a customizable experience. They know that if they force you to do the work, you will do the work of marketing the product for them. You will post pictures of your finished chair online, brag about the meal you cooked using their kit, and defend their app because you spent time configuring it. You become a creator as well as a customer. You are an employee of your own satisfaction. We find ourselves in a world where almost everything is designed to be completed by the user. We have moved from a society of passive consumption to a society of active creation. This is often framed as empowerment. It is described as a way to give people more control, more customization, more agency. But it is also a way to secure deep psychological buy-in. It is a way to ensure that we are invested in the things we buy, the services we use, and the brands we follow. We are building the things that consume us. There is a way to navigate this. We can acknowledge the bias without being controlled by it. We can appreciate the satisfaction of doing things for ourselves, while simultaneously stepping back to evaluate the results objectively. We can ask ourselves, if I had not spent hours building this, would I still think it was high quality? If I had not spent years on this project, would I still be proud of the outcome? This is a difficult question to ask. It requires us to separate our ego from our labor. It requires us to detach our sense of competence from the specific thing we are holding. But this separation is necessary if we want to make clear decisions. It is the only way to avoid the traps of our own creation. It allows us to keep the things that are truly valuable and discard the things that are only valuable because we spent time on them. It allows us to be creators who are not blinded by our own work. We can take pride in the effort, but we must also be willing to criticize the result. We can be the ones who build, but we must also be the ones who decide when to tear down. The Ikea effect is not a malfunction. It is a feature of the human mind. It is the mechanism that allows us to find meaning in the tasks we undertake. It is the drive that pushes us to build houses, raise families, write books, and launch startups. It is the source of our deepest satisfactions. But it is also the source of our most persistent delusions. We must learn to walk the line between the two. We must build, and we must create, and we must find joy in the labor. But we must never mistake the effort for the truth. We must never confuse the work we put into something with the actual value of the object itself. The next time you find yourself standing back to admire something you have built, whether it is a physical piece of furniture or a complicated idea you have constructed in your mind, take a second to look at it again. Ignore the hours you spent on it. Ignore the frustration you felt during the process. Look at it as if you had just walked into the room and seen it for the first time. If you had not been the one to build it, would you still love it? Would you still want it? The answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about whether you are building for value or whether you are just building to satisfy a bias. Walk over to the thing you made and put your hand flat against it. You can still feel it wobble.